God bless everybody. Today it is September 25th of 2023. That's a very special day. This is the most holy day in the Jewish calendar. This is Yom Kippur. And you can see Yom Kippur of 23 falls between Sunday 24th of September through Monday the 25th. So we are in Yom Kippur right now. And that is a very special day. It's the most holiest day on the Jewish calendar, and it's basically a day of atonement and repentance. So if you want to get right with God, this would be the most practical and most powerful day to petition Him with your prayers and repent due to time is very short. And we've talked about how I believe, in my opinion, we have approximately 4 years between now and the Feast of Trumpets in 27 before the rapture will occur. I believe it will happen on a sabbatical Saturday when the East Gate can be open, and that would happen on October 2nd of 2023. It actually runs on the 2nd and 3rd of 2023. That would be the Feast of Trumpets, but I always look to the sabbatical Saturdays. So in this video, I just wanted to point a few of these little things out first. So I'd originally done this video on February 7th of 2021, and I sort of was trying to show you that we have these basically over 7 years in North America we'll enjoy total solar eclipses in 2017 and 24. Plus you'll have annular solar eclipses in 21 and 23, which all radiate around that time in my paradigm that I've been showing you, that I will show you as we move forward. But it's interesting that these dates seem to make an anarchist sign over the United States. Now, I don't know if that means anything or not, and it's interesting because I'm in Illinois and we have a fault line here that this could be a real problem for this area here. As we move into 24, I talked about that potential 6 seal event at the end of 23, move into 24, and we walk into potential Antichrist and a signing of a treaty shortly after this, as I'll show you on the paradigm as we move forward. But it's interesting that we're having all these convergence of solar eclipses over the top of this country. Now, I'm not big on the United States being in the Bible. It's not. So just realize that. But we are being affected by what's going on in the Middle East and that area of the Bible that is being affected, which is that area of the Ottoman Empire, which will be the beast kingdom as we move forward. So is it affecting us also, and is he putting judgment down upon this nation? And will we go into anarchy by 24 prior to that rising of Antichrist I show on April 20th of 24, which is actually Hitler's birthday, as I'll show you on the paradigm as we move forward. So I'm going to go to the paradigm real quick because I'm going to show you where these dates fall, and then we'll move to the actual dates, and I want to show you a couple other things as we move forward here. So on this chart, the first eclipse would happen on August 21st of 2017, which would be right before Erdogan invaded, and Yom Kippur in 2019 on October 9th. The next date would be June 10th of 2021. Okay, so that's right in here. We just had that shofar warning in September of that year before. The third date, which I think is interesting because that falls right after this October 9th of 23 date that I've been talking about. That's October 14th of 23. And I show that we potentially might have that siege on Jerusalem on December 22nd of 2023 or 10 Tevet. So that's an extremely important thing to look at. And then as you move forward into this last date, which is April 8th of 2024, we walk into potentially a time between the continual burnt offerings being stopped and the signing of the treaty at the nations against Israel on April 20th of 2024. That would be Hitler's birthday. This would fall on April 8th of 2024. So I do believe these eclipses are lining up with this chart, and we need to watch these eclipses as we move forward. We also potentially, after this December 22nd of 23 date, which is potentially an attack on Israel and a besieging on Jerusalem itself, shortly after that you could have the sixth seal event, because all 10 nations are destroyed by the wrath of the Lamb on Revelation 6:16, because Erdogan is the white horseman of Revelation. He will bring the next 3 seals against the world. So the first 4 seals, led by Erdogan, will bring a quarter of the world into war. And so we need to watch that. Another thing that I had done back about 2 years ago, this says June 27th of 2020, so actually it's been longer than that. It's been almost 3.5 years ago. I saw these 4 blood moons, and we had the 6th planetary conjunction over the United States on the 4th of July over this country. So July 4th of 2020, we were going to see this interesting display of 6 planets alignment over the United States, and that we were going to see a potential PowerPoint of this country starting to break down as we move forward. And look where we come in the last few years, and that also falls within that time of Yom Kippur of October 9th of 2019. Shortly after that, we start to see the United States also being affected as we're watching those 4 solar eclipses affect this country and actually produce that large A over the top of us, which I've been talking about possibly means anarchy. But watch this video real quick. I want to show you how this alignment happened. It's really interesting, and this happens right over the United States on the 4th of July on that very specific day. See how this plays out real quick.
But check this out. Okay, as we move forward, you can start to see what's going to happen here. He's going to stop it for a second. He wants you to see this alignment. Look at this alignment. This is on June. This is in June, okay? So he's going to move forward, and you're going to move it into where we can actually start to see this, okay? This is pretty important stuff. So he moves it all the way up to the 4th of July. And like I say, this is compressed, but look how this timeline adds up. This is incredible, man. This is extremely important. We're starting to see so many things happen in 2020.
So I'm not going to go extreme into these charts, but I just think it's really interesting that you can chart all this stuff out. You can actually see where it goes. You can use the total eclipse site here from NASA and actually go into these total eclipses. I'm going to go into each of all 4 of them real quickly so you can see the paths and different things like that. Please check them out yourself. I'm just going to do a brief overview of this. So the first one we need to look at was August 21st, 2017. It had a path of totality, so we could actually, it went across the whole United States, as you can see here. You can sort of see the paths. You can see how the sun reflected off, or the moon was blocking the sun, so you can see that path there. A number of these eclipses are moving through. That's the one that came down, that will come down on June 10th. So that's something extremely important. And you can see the areas that it's being affected. So I just want you to realize, you know, you can do a little research on your own. If you go to the next eclipse, which was on June 10th of 21, you can see the path on that. This is that one that comes down from the north and then goes through Canada and then down through the United States. So it's interesting that you can see the paths of these things, where it actually goes through, what areas they are being affected, just different pieces of information, things that you should be aware of. And he says to watch the the sun, the moon, the stars, and all these things for signs. And so we need to be watching those things. The one coming up is on October 14th of 23. And I talked about how we're walking into this potential siege on Jerusalem as we move forward, and how Daniel had that vision between September 18th of this year on my paradigm to October 9th on the paradigm, and then right after that we potentially have the solar eclipse, annual solar eclipse that goes across the United States and South America. And so it's interesting the timing of some of these things and how these paths are literally affecting the globe and these different areas. And so maybe God's showing us that this area is going to be tremendously affected. Actually, the whole United States will be affected within the next 7 years, between August 21st of 2017 and April 8th of 2024. We'll see how that works. And it does seem to work into my paradigm nicely. So I'm sort of waiting to see how that works myself. This last eclipse that I've been talking about, which I think is probably one of the most important ones, would be on April 8th of 2024. And this is right before, or actually right between, on my chart, the stopping of the continual burnt offerings, and then you would have a signing of the treaty on that day of April 20th of 2024 on Hitler's birthday, that this might be a sign to us that things are going to break and the world is basically going into tribulation. Because at that signing we would actually start tribulation, because that is the time, the 1260 days between the signing of the treaty and abomination. And so we need to look at that and see how that's going to affect us. It gives you all the areas that it's being affected, the areas and the times that it's going to go over. And so you may be over one of these areas. And like I say, if you look at my positioning in Illinois, we have this fault line here, and so we need to be concerned about what that might affect us on that day, or around that signing of the Treaty of Death with the Nations against Israel. And another thing to state about that is that Jerusalem will be sieged for 18 months, so they will still be under attack at this point. So if you go to the paradigm and you look at how this all plays out, let's go through this chart again. So we have that August 21st of 2017 eclipse, which is moving us into a 7-year cycle to the signing of this treaty on potentially April of 24, and we have that fourth eclipse on April 8th of 2024 here, right before the signing. This seems to be lining up. The second one I said was June 10th of 2021, which would be the actual beginning of the 2300 days on my chart. So that's interesting that that would fall right before the 2300 days on my chart. And then the last one would be right after this vision that Daniel has. We have this next solar eclipse prior to potentially an invasion, okay, so three things can happen here. I've been talking about this for a while. I think two are more plausible than the third. One would be we would see a potential invasion by Turkey around this area, and that would then start to revive that Neo-Ottoman Empire. You potentially would see an attack, because right here Angel Michael moves against goes forward and attacks Iran. So at that moment in time, we could actually see an attack on Iran from Israel. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that Iran and the third one would be that Iran would then attack Israel prior to Israel actually attacking first. And so, but based on this, it sort of states that we're going to see between September 18th and October 9th a lot of stuff going on where Iran's literally attacking them, but it's not a full-fledged attack. And then on October 9th, or around that date, we would see Israel actually lash out with a major attack that would then lead us into a potential invasion by Gog, which is Turkey through Syria, Lebanon into Israel. That would then lead us to a besieging of Jerusalem by potentially December 22nd of 23 based on my date. So, and that would be 10 Tevet of 5784, which would be the same time that the walls, the siege on Jerusalem happened in the past with King Nebuchadnezzar in the first siege on the temple in 588 or 589, 588 BC. And so this is extremely important. It's interesting that all these dates fall between now and the signing of the treaty, and as all this is happening in Israel itself, we are actually seeing potentially a judgment against not only the world, but the United States. And you had that huge astrological conjunction back here on the 4th of July, right after this. So that was here. So that sixth planet astrological conjunction was on the 4th of July, which ended up being right around in this area here. So it's just really important. Do understand that the United States is not mentioned in the Bible. It is a Israel-centristic and a Turkey-centristic book, because that's where the seat of Satan or the seat of the beast is. And so we need to understand where his centricity is, and also if Jesus has a bride in Jerusalem, then Antichrist also has his bride, and I've talked about that for some time. I believe that is Pergamus, Turkey. There's a letter that's written to Pergamus in the 7 letters in Revelation prior to when John is taken up in 4:1 that we should look at. And if you look at that verbiage there in that letter, it talks about a two-sword judgment of Jesus's tongue against that. If you look at the 5th bowl, you will see similar terminology there, but we won't get into that today. So I think it's extremely important that we look at all these different things. I think it's extremely important that as you look at that map and the movements of these eclipses that are coming up in the 7 years between 2017 and 2024, that we are going to see something extremely interesting happen. We're going to see a potential rise of Antichrist shortly after this April 8th of 2024 date, which would then take us from the birth pains and sorrows, which are what happens prior to the signing. Then you move into tribulation. Tribulation runs from the signing of the treaty to abomination, or abomination of desolation. And from that moment on, from abomination of desolation, we start into great tribulation. Okay, so there is demarcations that you need to be aware of. You start in the birth pains and sorrows. Once the treaty signs, you start into tribulation. And then once abomination happens, you start into great tribulation. So you need to understand these markers. And so if people are saying that you're in tribulation right now, you just need to look at them and say, well, they haven't signed a treaty with the nations against Israel, so why would you say that? Because he tells you clearly it's 1260 days, which leads you into abomination, which leads you into the destruction of the temple and the destruction of the 2 witnesses. So Be aware of all that. Find the open door. Find God. Find Jesus. He's the open door to get to God. If you want to get to heaven, you need to believe in the Son. God bless everybody today. Have a great day. Watch these events. They're coming soon.